Welcome to Let's Talk Money, Honey, the podcast where we break down the barriers to financial success.
I'm Elise Levy here with Holly Henry, and we're your hosts, two financial advisors on a mission to demystify investing, unravel the complexities of money, and sprinkle a little wisdom into your life.
Whether you're a seasoned investor or just dipping your toes into the world of finance, join us once a month as we discuss how to navigate life's financial twists and turns. Just remember, building wealth and living your best life should be empowering, not intimidating.
So listen up and let's talk money, honey. All right, we're back for another episode of Let's Talk Money, Honey, and we have a lot to talk about today. So, Holly, what's on the agenda?
So, we are going to be talking about the financial orders of operation, better known as FOO sometimes. And this is basically what you need to start with when you're looking at your budget or your debt, how you want to start prioritizing your finances. And again, this is just a very generic order. This is not something that fits every single one, but this is something that we just wanted kind of to give you as a guideline, especially for the young people that are starting out that just don't know which way to turn.
Yeah, I feel like it's our investing Bible. So you're ready to start on your journey. You don't know where to begin. This is a really good basic checklist to follow. And we have this actually written out that we're going to give a free version to anyone who wants it. So you'll just have to reach out to that. But if you want it in written word, we have that as well. So let's jump into step one. What is the first thing you're going to do when getting your finances in order?
So you're going to pay off the high interest debt. And one of the things that I immediately think of is credit card debt. Credit card they're now charging what, 20, we've talked about this, like 26,
I know,
27%?
and that was a couple months ago when we checked on that, so it might be even higher now.
Yeah, a ridiculous amount. And so you've got to just really focus on, and again, I think immediately credit card debt, anything that it just has a high interest debt to it, because it's going to end up taking your paycheck before you know it. And you've got to just not pay that minimum balance. That minimum balance may not even be paying the interest on it.
Yeah, and I think, we talk about credit cards a lot, and I wanna say, like, we are pro credit cards. It's a very powerful tool. The points, all of that good stuff, it's a good thing, but you really need to be paying it off all the time. So depending on your paycheck frequency, that's always a good one. You always wanna be paying it off monthly, but if you get paid biweekly or twice a month, pay it off each time you get paid and just get in a habit of keeping that zero balance because it really is going to serve you so well. And if you have credit card debt, like let's say you're walking in the door with $5,000 in debt, what's a good strategy to pay that off, Holly?
Oh, I just say as much as you can, snowball it. Any extra thing that you've got, it's, I don't want to say, and we're going to go more into detail into this. There's things you have to work on at the same time. Emergency funds critical. Employee match if you've got retirement. You can't just set those to the side. Any extra money though, when you're talking to high interest, we need to be cutting going out to eat. We
Mhm.
need to, or at least have a very, very, very good balance. We need to be cutting our just frivolous spending.
Yeah.
It's gotta go, especially people, and I like my boxes of wine, but it's completely unnecessary. I love my Amazon clothes shopping, but it's completely unnecessary. I love going out with my friends. It's completely unnecessary. Like, I can
Yeah.
still live and enjoy free things, and then that money goes to the credit card bills.
Well, and it's short-term pain for long-term success. So it's like if you are walking in the door with credit card debt, we're going to say like, let's cut back significantly for 3 months or 6 months, whatever it's going to take, and get it paid off. And then you can go back to a quality of life once you've kind of set it up for success.
Yes, it's
Um,
forever deal, and that sometimes that it feels really hard. And one thing that I will also say, if you're in credit card debt, cut up those credit cards until there is a time to where it can be managed properly. Because what I have found, even for myself, it is really easy to swipe that card. And the stuff that I'm putting on my credit cards are not normally necessities. It is one thing if you're putting food on your credit card, tires for your vehicle that you have to have. It is another, and this is not a judgment scenario. I don't want anyone to ever think that we're judging.
No.
It's very, very easy, and I've done it before, to swap that card for shoes that I didn't have to have. And again, I pay that off monthly, but
Mhm.
for whatever reason, it is easier to swap that card than to hand over the cash.
And you know what I do? I do this every time. I'm like, well, I'm probably going to return a lot of this.
I don't know what happens at like night to where I feel like it is the perfect time to shop online. And the next morning, I'm like, why did I buy those clothes? I have no event that I'm going to. and,
Yeah,
and
so
like,
we're
I'll
human
return.
too.
Yes, absolutely. And then I don't return it.
I'm very guilty of that as well. So moving on, Holly mentioned emergency fund, and that's just like another thing. I feel like we hammer it, we talk about it all the time, but it is so critical because life happens, as we know. You know, you pop a tire, you got to get new ones. You know, the kid gets sick. Like life happens, and you need money for that moment, so you're not turning to your credit card. See how that's happening.
Yes, so at least what is the normal recommendation for an emergency fund? So one, we have the high interest debt that you
Yep.
focus on. Two, we have the emergency fund, and what's the rule of thumb for that?
So I think it's different for everyone, but you really do want at least 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So when I say living expenses, that means either your rent or your mortgage, it means gas, it means food. You really want to group together all those necessities to get that number. So, like worst case scenario, you lose your job or you're laid off or your spouse is, you have money to not feel stressed while figuring out your next steps. And it's really, really critical just to have that safety net. And then also, we're going to recommend that you put it in a high yield vehicle. So, if it's a high yield savings account, but anything that's earning interest, that's going to be even better because you do want it in cash. You don't want this to be invested money. You want this to be accessible. So if it's in a high yield savings account or a money market or just in your bank, anything that you can access it at a moment's notice and doesn't follow the fluctuations of the market.
Yeah, that's the key. And I've had so many clients that they want to invest that emergency fund because they're seeing rates that are, S&P has been double digits return. And that is great on the years it happens. The last few weeks, if you had just invested that money and you need to get part of it out, you've now, if you're having to pull it, the market's down. It's very up and down right now. So you don't want to you don't want to risk your emergency fund. That's something that it's like, it is there to be safe. And I do love high yield savings accounts right now that are actually,
Hmm.
the interest rates are over 4% in
Yeah,
most of.
anything over four, I say, is great right
Yes.
now.
Yes. And while I do feel like that's probably going to drop, as we see just rates dropping over the next few months or few years or however this is, take advantage of it while you can.
Right? Yeah. And I think that's like the whole thing is this is working smarter, not harder. And as we kind of go through the list of things, you'll see, you know, your strategy for money and building wealth, you have all these different buckets, you know,
Mhm.
so you don't want everything in investments. You don't want everything on the sidelines in cash. And so that's what we're doing. We're just creating these different resources for different reasons for pulling from. And the emergency one is a really powerful tool to have in your tool belt as life happens.
Mhm.
So, moving on, let's go to number three, insurance. So, Holly, what kind of insurance does the average person need or should be looking for?
One, you need to have medical. We all know that like medical can get crazy right fast, and you have to be sure to have appropriate deductibles that you can afford. And you have to be able to understand your insurance policy. And as someone that has worked in human resources at a previous job and was over the insurance policy, I can tell you most of the employees, they don't like insurance, they don't want to know it. It's a very, very important that you do understand it. And that's something that your financial advisor can walk you through to make sure that you even have the right policies. What's the point in having a medical insurance that has a high deductible if you can't afford it? If you don't have the emergency fund to gap that, you're now just setting yourself up for failure. So,
Absolutely. And I do think like knowing your life phases. So, it's like if you're going to be pregnant or your spouse is going to be pregnant or, you do have a lot of health issues more than the average person, like those are things to look into because there's always going to be different options when it comes to your deductible. So really learning what's going to be right for you in your situation is important.
Yes, and with health insurance, and we'll talk a little bit more about HSAs, but you can pair them up with flexible spending accounts or health saving arrangement. There are options that are out there, and so again, it's important to talk to your financial advisor to make sure, just as like a fresh eyes to review. Aside from medical, you need to have appropriate vehicle coverage if you have a vehicle, which most Americans do. One thing that I know for me personally is I haven't filed a claim, knock on wood, in years. So I ended up increasing my deductible because I knew that I could afford a higher deductible if something happens. And then
Mhm.
it reduces your premium amount. And one thing that we don't want people to do is have the lowest deductible in medical, vehicle, and whatever if you're not going to be utilizing it, because the lower the deductible, the higher the premium. So if you can afford
Exactly.
it,
It's kind of like a
yeah,
seesaw.
sometimes, yes, yeah, and sometimes to where you have to almost self-insure, like, some of that deductible. Like, for instance, I think I went up to 2,000 on my vehicle because I'm like, "It's fine. Like, if something crazy happens, I'm gonna pay the 2,000, but chances are I'm not going." And I'm saving, like, 3 to 400, I think, on the premium. It was a large enough difference. I'm like, "Well, I'm just gonna carry the risk."
Yeah,
Um, and it's fine. So you have the vehicle. Oh, home insurance. Again, this is like the very same thing. We need to make sure that your home is properly insured, because in some cases it's just not, and there's a lot of options out there. And then aside from home insurance, you go into life insurance if you feel like you need life insurance. And that alone is several options. You've got whole, you've got term, and even in whole life, you've got different options that fall into
yeah, I
um,
think we could do a whole episode on insurance.
on just the insurance, and it's overwhelming, and you can get cross-eyed right fast. And in a lot of cases, I have found that whole life insurance is very expensive and may not be for everyone. I like term insurance, especially for the younger people that probably can't afford whole life. And this is something that you really just sit down and you talk to your financial advisor again and just have them review and just make sure you have everything where it needs to be.
Absolutely. And I think like a lot of employers now offer term life insurance through that. So it's like you can pay a really small amount. It's like $5 a month, and get it through your work so that if you do pass while you're working, that'll kick in. But I want to also say it is very easy to be overinsured.
Yes.
And I think we live in a world today where we're all selling stuff, and insurance is one of those things that the news and ads say you have to have this, you need this. Chances are, if you're a normal everyday person, you don't need a ton of life insurance. So it is good if you're thinking about these things, talk to Holly and I because we can really give you the cold hard facts and say, this really isn't that beneficial, or maybe it is considering your situation. But it's very easy to, we see people every day that they have a whole life insurance policy and they have this and they have that, and it really isn't necessary.
No, and for what you're paying for it, it's like, take some of that and invest it. And in the end, you're probably going to come out ahead. And I will also say you have to be very, very careful about some of these specific policies that are for, and I'm just going to throw this out there, like cancer policies. There's a lot of exclusions on there. There are some great cancer policies. They're like everything else, there's some that's just not good. And so you need to just have your financial advisor review long-term care insurance. There's some great policies out there. They're extremely expensive. So if someone's wanting to sell you a cheap policy, I can tell you probably right now it's not worth the paper that it's on. And so take the money that you're probably paying for the cheap policy and invest it.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that we're trying to sell investing, but I've had clients specifically say I'm insurance poor. And they're just way overinsured. And so,
Yeah, it happens. It's real.
yeah.
100%. So we've we're insured now.
Mhm.
We have our emergency fund, we've paid off our high debt. So the next step is your employee match. And I think this is a good time to do a little asterisk. Even though we have this listed, it doesn't mean that you can't be working on things at the
Yeah.
same. So we're saying this in order of importance, but really you can be doing steps 1 through 4 at the same time.
Well, and one thing that when Elise and I were creating this, we even said 1 through 4 is like basically 1. Like you
Yeah.
can't just at any point just turn your nose up and go, "That's not important." I don't want you just struggling to push and pay off credit card debt if it takes 4 or 5 years and you just totally negate your employee match, especially if you're in your 20s, because once you set aside in your 20s for investing,
Mm.
it goes so much further than if you're in your 30s and your 40s, and I want to almost just say, if I only knew, because here I am, I celebrated a birthday and I'm almost 40. I'm and so if I
You look 30.
part of the other day and I was like, please check my ID. And so if I knew in my 20s what a difference it would make to invest on what I'm having to put in now to get that amount, don't just negate your employee match. You're leaving money on the table.
Yeah, 100%. I think if anything, and I feel the same way at my age, I'm like, if I had known what investing could have done if I had started at 20, 22, 25, it's just crazy how those younger years have such a big impact. But to go into detail about your employer match. So most people there's plenty of exceptions, but most people have a 401k through their work. And that's the most common employer plan there is. There's a lot of variations, a lot of different options, but that's the most normal one. And so what happens is you put in a percentage as the employee, and then the employer matches. Now that is going to vary company to company. I've heard of people getting a 2% match. I've heard of people getting a 20% match. It's just all over the map, and it's just dependent on what your company can give. So if they're financially in good order and if they're generous. So our rule of thumb, number one, is you at least always want to do the employer match. You want to match that full amount. So if they're matching up to 4%, you at least want to do 4%, no less. And that's just across the board. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Now, beyond that, there are some other good rules of thumb. So, like, we're really trying to get that number to 20%. But how you do that is I always like to tell clients increase your contribution by 1% every year. You won't notice. I guarantee you, going from 4% to 5%, you will not notice. So do that once a year. And then also, every time you get a raise, also up at a percentage. So you're paying your future self first before you take that money. And it'll be surprising how quickly you get to that 20%. And like Holly said, it's like if you're young and you're doing this and you're putting away 20% at like 30, 35, you're going to hit your retirement goals so much sooner than everyone else. It's pretty mind blowing. Holly, what do you want to add?
I just want to say if in your 20s, when you if you assuming you're single, kind of carefree, you don't have kids yet, the more you can put in, you can scale back later. Like,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
that's the thing. It's like, okay, if you can do the 20 or 30% in your 20s, when you get married, when you have kids, when you have the mortgage, when you have the vehicle, whatever life throws at you, you can then scale back and still be way ahead. And that's what people need to remember is what they set the tone in their 20s. But if you just say, oh, I'm going to focus on the credit card debt and totally don't do anything for retirement, you're going to be playing catch up in your 30s and 40s. And I will say, as someone that's in my late 30s, I'm now paying for competition gymnastics and basketball and the house and everything else that comes with it. And my daughter has discovered Lululemon. And so life is more expensive now for me than it was in my 20s. Yes, I'm making more income, but that $25 would have went so much further in my 20s than now. It's just not. It's not going to make much of a difference. Not saying that people don't need to start somewhere, but in your 20s, you set the tone for your retirement.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And exactly what you said, it's like saving now when you don't have all this overhead is going to be so much easier than saving down the road. So I think that takes us into our next one, which is our most favorite account, Roth, and also HSA. So Holly, what are those?
Okay, so the Roth account. Um, this is basically where you take after-tax money, you put it in a Roth IRA, or some people have the options with the retirement plan, so it could be a Roth 401k, but then it grows tax-free, and then when you get ready to withdraw it at retirement, this is a retirement plan, you can pull everything out tax-free. This is just a wonderful way to be tax efficient. HSAs are no, there is such tax efficiencies to HSAs. And basically, this pairs up with your insurance. So, if you are able to afford a higher deductible, there are plans that are HSA compatible. And
Mhm.
to be totally transparent, Elise and I were talking about this, and neither one of our plans are HSA compatible. So, as we're going
Unfortunately.
through this, yeah, as we're going through the list, we're like, well, we're not even like
Yeah.
doing this because right now the plan that I'm on, it's not even compatible. Now, I will say I'm looking into this because I think HSAs are such a powerful tool, and it's the same thing. Like you set money aside and you basically allow it to grow and pull it out when you need it for medical expenses. And right now, since my insurance is not HSA compatible, I have a flexible spending account. And the difference is with the flexible spending account, if you don't use it within the year, you lose it. So
Mm.
you cannot grow it the way that you can in HSA. And that to me is very, very powerful because one, for the kids and I, we don't have a lot of medical expenses. So I could put money aside and it grow for years and years. Um, both Ross and HSAs, again, such tax efficiency. I will say Ross are like the golden ticket for teenagers in 20s. This was not, I mean, they haven't been around for that long.
No,
And I'm seeing people come in and they're wanting to do these conversions when they're in their 50s or even early 60s. And it just isn't going to help them the way that it would if it's a 20-year-old. Not saying that it's not bad. And I will also say a lot of people think that that they make too much money to get a Roth. There are loopholes. We know this and we know how to and they're legal loopholes. This is not bad. And we know how to set up the accounts to where really salaries should not even be a consideration.
yeah, absolutely. And she's talking about backdoor Roth, which is we can do for anyone. And speaking of salary, it's another reason why it's great for younger people because there is that salary limit. So doing it while you're young. And, let's say hypothetically you start contributing when you're 23 and you go over the salary at 35. Well, you had those years where you were contributing. And if you just leave that alone, that's going to be a really nice nest egg by the time you retire. And there's so many details to Ross we can go into. But we're not going to today because this is more of a high level overview.
We'd be here all day. That is probably one of our soapboxes that we can talk on for hours. So if you've
Yes.
got questions, let us
Well,
know.
and we do have a video. So if you want to learn the details on rocks, there is a video you can watch. So we'll make sure that you check that out. But moving on, we want to talk about prepaid future expenses. So that really is talking about college and saving for the future and kids' expenses, basically. So you basically, steps 1 through 5 are really taking care of you. And now 6 is kind of looking at the next generation and taking care of kids. So if you have kids, you're not living under a rock, you know how expensive school is and how expensive college is. So you want to start saving for that as soon as possible. And just like for you saving for retirement, if you start when they're babies and just start squirreling away a little bit at a time, it's so much easier than waiting till they're 15 and trying to make up the difference for college. Um, so 529s are a great vehicle for that. There's also UGMAs and a ton of different accounts. And, that's another conversation to have with Holly and I to figure out what's right for you. 529s have to really stay in that education umbrella. But if you're thinking bigger picture, like maybe a down payment for a house, their first car, something like that, an UTMA might be a better choice. But really utilizing that investment strategy for those future expenses that are going to come down the road. Holly, anything to add?
Yeah, I want to say that for 529s especially, there is a tax credit in most states. So again, great vehicle for tax efficiency. And there has been new legislature that has come down the pipeline to where um, you can roll over a portion of that into Ross for your kids. And so
Yep.
this is not like a use it or lose it type situation. And 529s are not just for your kids. It can be for your grandkids. It can be for nieces or nephews. It can just be for a family friend, whatever. These are great accounts. These are accounts that Elise and I do not charge to manage, but we do just help advise on. And I will be very transparent. I have 529s for my kids because when I think about college, and it's not just tuition, it can be laptops. Uh,
Books.
yeah, there's a lot that falls underneath this umbrella. But I also have UTM accounts that were set up specifically for braces and vehicles. And that sort of thing is definitely a conversation in the midst of my daughter having braces. They're expensive, and then I'm going to turn around and get the braces off of her mouth to have to probably fund a vehicle. And so when they were little, it's like, okay, let's just put extra money aside, knowing that it's going to grow. And at the time, it doesn't feel like it's grown a lot, but now my daughter's almost 12, and I've seen, okay, the money's there. The money's there, and it has grown a little bit. And even if if you're like, it's just $1,000 or it's just a couple $1,000, that's less that you're having to come up with, and you're doing nothing to earn it. Like it's just passively growing. Um, so again, this is a little bit down the ladder of the FOO. It's not something you want to focus on if you've got credit card debt up to your eyeballs, but it's definitely something that you need to just keep in mind.
Yeah, 100%. And I wanted to say, Holly mentioned it, but 529s are transferable. So if you have three kids, you can put it in the name of one kid. If they don't use it all, it can go to another kid. Like Holly was saying, it can go to a grandchild if you never use it and end up having grandkids. And that's really great. And then another thing I love is anyone can contribute to the 529. It doesn't have to come from the account creator. So at Christmas time, if the grandparents are struggling to figure out what to give their kids, or you're not a materialistic family, everyone can contribute to the 529, and I love that. And same with the UTMA. And it just allows for everyone in the family to be able to give to the child's future. And just, yeah, like we said, steps 1 through 4, it's kind of like you're on the airplane. You got to put your mask on first before you put the mask on your kid. So you have to have your shit in order
Yeah.
before you start worrying about them. And so that takes us into step 7. What is next?
Okay, so that's gonna be like the low interest debt. Um, at least remember the day when mortgages were like 3%, which is not what
Yeah. And
we're
I
now.
wasn't in a position to buy, and it's a bummer.
I know. So now for those of you that are lucky that have these low interest mortgage debt, it's fine to have them. Like when you can invest the money in the stock market or in a CD or a high yield savings account and you're coming out ahead, or like the car loans, and I had mentioned this, like Tesla's doing like a 1.5 or 1.99. These are very low interest, and not that I like to have car debt but still very low debt or very low percentage. And so it's not something that you just need to drive yourself crazy trying to pay off.
Yeah, and I think like, a lot of people come in and say, "Should I just pay off my car? I'm so tired of having the monthly payment." I'm like, "Okay, well, what's your interest rate?" And if it's 2% or something like that, it's like, "No, we're going to keep that because you can take that extra money and invest it."
Yeah.
And so really having that awareness of, yes, you have a payment, but it's allowing you to do other things and put money into other pots. That's important. And like there really is such a thing as good debt, and houses are number one. You're building equity. So knowing that there is good debt out there and taking advantage of it and having it help you build.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have now done 1 through 7. We're down to 8 and there's just 9. So just hang in there with us. We've just got a couple more. So Elise, number 8.
Okay, so number 8 is bringing us back to retirement. So, as you know, you can contribute to your 401k, but all these accounts, Roth, IRA, all of them, they have a max number you can contribute. So, the 401k, that number is going to be 23,000. And just like all the other accounts, these numbers change. So, in high inflation years, they'll bump them up and they continue to go up. I've never seen them go back down again, but the limits always go up. And there's always a catch up limit. So if you're over a certain age, you're going to be able to invest even more than that. And that's what you want to do. You want to be maxing out your retirement. So I know that sounds crazy to some people. They're like, how can I be putting that much away? But I have to say the best thing about this, and it does depend on your income level and all this different stuff, but this is tax deductible. So if you're putting in this money into your retirement, the government sees you as making less on your income and you're going to get more money out during tax time. So it's really like a win-win, Holly. I can't sell it any other way.
No, I know, and it's a lot of people just think that retirement's so far off, so they're not wanting to put all that money in. Um, Again, we really need to be maxing out Roth IRAs. That is after tax money that $7,000 unless you're over 50, and then you can bump it up another 1,000. But to me, it's like that can be very doable. And I know some people look at the 20 something thousand and think that's hard. But we're at the end of the ladder. This is something you focus on at the very end. The good thing with a Roth IRA, and we didn't talk about this, and again, go watch the video if there's questions, you can take out the principal. You leave the earnings there without being penalized. But again, your focus is at this point, let's put as much money back at retirement as you can, especially if you didn't start in your 20s.
Yeah,
Like,
and you want to take advantage of that because it's going to serve you really well in retirement. And lowering that taxable income, it's awesome and it'll help you out. So I think moving on, we're at the last phase. What is the last phase?
it's the best. It's hyper accumulation. You've just done everything right and you're getting to sit back and just enjoy it and just seeing it. You're getting to see all these accounts grow. You're getting to kind of sit back and just really relax and maybe buy some things like that you don't, maybe a vacation home. Maybe, whatever. Like you don't want to just take on debt. Like let's not just go blow money. But you're getting to just sit back and relax. Everything's in order. You're
Mhm.
good. You're good. And again, like this is the importance of working with a financial advisor to have someone go, even if you're in steps 4 and 5 in whatever phase of your life, like you're good. You're good. Like you're not going to hit 20 or in your 20s at number 9. Chances are this is going to be something you hit in your 50s, maybe 60s, maybe never. But it's important that you have a financial advisor to sit there and tell you you're fine or you're not. Let's change things around.
Yeah, and I do think like even if you're not at the hyper accumulation phase, if you're doing all these steps, you are in like the low financial anxiety phase is what I would say. So because you've set up all these things, you're auto contributing, you know you're doing the match, you know where you're at, so you can relax a
Mhm.
little bit. And I think like financial anxiety, the number one reason people have it is because they don't know where their money's going.
Yeah.
So by going through these steps, and understanding where it's going, you're building, maybe you're still building some of those early numbers, but you have a strategy and a plan. So you are going to be more relaxed. And I think like peace of mind is everything, Holly.
Absolutely. And we've said 100 times balance is important. We don't want you to try and push to get to number 9 and you miss out on life. Especially with kids, you don't have them forever. So don't push and push and push that you are foregoing the family vacations that you could have afforded to be able to go on. just to get to number 9 because you're not guaranteed to live to 60 to 70 to we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So it's like there's got to be balance. Like let's get things in order and let's get it going right. But let's also remember that every day is a blessing and that we have to enjoy today, but be financially minded, be financially intentional with this stuff.
Absolutely. And I think the last thing to go over is just like how often should we be reviewing this? So, Holly, what do you think is a good rule of thumb?
I mean, honestly, like once a year.
Yeah.
I really think the initial conversation is going to take a while.
Yes.
That is, it's going to take a while to just dig through it and get a person in line to go. After that, we have annual meetings with our clients, and it's very easy to just catch up and see where you're at. And I will say sometimes life happens and you fall back a step or two, and that's okay. You just get back on the bicycle and you just keep going. Again, this is a very generic order, and sometimes life happens and it's going to get out of order. But again, that's why we have the annual reviews to just kind of go over it. And if life happens and there needs to be a review in the midst of it, that's okay too. That's why we're here. We meet with our clients as often as they need to be met with.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, if you need that handout and you want the physical copy, just shoot us an email, message, DM, whatever, and we'll get that to you. All right. Thanks so much for listening.